So, here's the thing, I never thought this would happen to me. You know how everyone jokes about that one time when everything goes wrong? Well, that was me, except it wasn't funny at all. This whole mess started on a perfectly normal Sunday afternoon, or so I thought. My wife, Emma, and I were on our way to visit her parents. The plan was simple, a quiet drive, some awkward small talk, and then a quick dinner before heading home. We had been together for 5 years, married for 3. Things weren't perfect, but I honestly thought we were in a good place. There were no huge red flags, no screaming matches, no cold silences. But as I was driving down the highway, heading toward her folks' place, Emma's phone started buzzing on the seat next to her. It wasn't anything unusual at first. She'd get notifications all the time, from work or her friends, nothing to worry about. But the thing was, she didn't grab her phone. She just let it buzz away, and that was weird. Normally, she'd pick it up immediately, even in the middle of a conversation. I glanced over at her, she wasn't even looking at it. She was staring out the window, deep in thought, her fingers tapping nervously on her knee. For some reason, that moment felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but I knew something had shifted. I should have said something, but instead, I let it go. As we got closer to her parents' place, Emma's phone buzzed again. This time, I couldn't help myself. I just asked, "Who's texting you?" I don't know why I asked, it wasn't like I had reason to be suspicious. But something about the tension in the air made me want to break it, or at least understand what was going on in her head. She glanced at me, but instead of answering, she quickly picked up her phone, unlocked it, and placed it face down on the seat between us. I didn't push it further. I should have. Maybe I didn't want to come off as controlling or intrusive, but deep down, I knew something was off. We arrived at her parents' house, and for the rest of the evening, Emma was quieter than usual. The usual banter was missing, and every now and then, I'd catch her sneaking a glance at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. It was subtle, but the signs were there. Something was wrong. By the time we left her parents' house, I was starting to feel like I was in the middle of a strange dream. Everything felt distant, like I was watching myself from the outside, trying to piece together what had changed in my marriage. It felt like a small crack in the wall, barely noticeable, but enough to make me question everything. The drive back home was quieter than I had expected. Emma seemed lost in thought, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing just beneath the surface. It wasn't until we were about 10 minutes from our house that the silence finally broke. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. I nodded, though my stomach dropped. I wasn't ready for whatever was coming, but I could feel the tension between us thickening, suffocating the air. I pulled off onto a side road, parking the car. The streetlights flickered in the distance, casting long shadows across the interior of the car. I turned to face her, waiting for her to speak. I've been talking to someone," she said, the words leaving her mouth with an unexpected heaviness. My heart sank, and I think my body physically recoiled, like I was punched in the chest. It took me a moment to process what she'd just said. I couldn't believe it. She was talking to someone? In what way? My mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, none of them good. Who? I asked, my voice shaky, though I tried to sound calm. It's someone from work, she continued, her hands fiddling with her necklace nervously. We've been talking for a while, and it's nothing physical. But I think I've developed feelings for him. And there it was. The bombshell I didn't see coming. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind was in overdrive, trying to process everything she just said, but I was stuck on one word, feelings. How could she say that so casually? I felt like the ground had been ripped from under me. I stared at her, struggling to find the right words. Feelings? I managed to croak, my voice barely above a whisper. For him? Really? She nodded, her gaze dropping to her lap. I didn't want to tell you like this. I didn't want it to come to this, but I need to be honest. I've been confused. And I think I need to figure out where my head is at. It was like my world was crumbling. For years, I had trusted her, believed in us, and now it felt like everything was built on sand. My chest tightened as I tried to wrap my head around what she was saying. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the words that came out were not what I expected. So, what? Are you telling me you're leaving me? Or you're planning to? What? Start something with this guy? Emma shook her head quickly, looking up at me now, her eyes wide with a mixture of guilt and desperation. No, no. It's not like that. I'm not leaving you. I don't want to hurt you. I don't know what to do with these feelings. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her 100 questions, demand answers, but I could barely process the shock of it all. I just stared at her, feeling helpless. The air in the car felt suffocating. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there, trying to breathe through the chaos in my mind. The silence in the car felt like it stretched on forever. My mind was racing, but all I could feel was anger. How could she? I kept thinking. How could she do this to us? My thoughts turned dark, and I found myself clenching my fists, fighting the urge to yell. I finally broke the silence, my voice low but tight with rage. You've been talking to him for how long? And you didn't think it would affect our marriage? You're just telling me this now? Emma flinched at my words, and for a second, I felt guilty for the anger in my voice. But then it hit me again, this wasn't about me being hurt anymore, this was about betrayal. She had feelings for another man. I couldn't get past that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't want this. It just happened. I didn't know how to deal with it, and I thought I could just bury it. But I can't. I needed to be honest. Honest? I snapped. You think being honest now is enough? You let this thing grow between you and him, and now I'm supposed to just be okay with you telling me you're confused? You think that makes it better? I could see her eyes start to well up, but I didn't care. The hurt and anger had clouded everything. I needed answers. I wanted to know why. Why would she let it go this far? Why didn't she talk to me before it got to this point? I don't know what I want anymore, she said quietly, almost to herself, her voice cracking. I just know I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's not. I shook my head in disbelief. Pretending? Emma, I thought we were fine. We were supposed to be fine. And just like that, my anger shifted to something else, something deeper. Something I wasn't ready to face yet, confusion. Where did we go from here? After that, the car was filled with nothing but the sound of our breathing. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't find any words that would make sense, and honestly, I didn't even know what I wanted from her at that moment. I was mad. I was hurt. But I also just felt numb. We drove the rest of the way home in complete silence. Emma kept glancing at me from the corner of her eye, but I refused to look at her. The road seemed longer than usual, the lights of the city blurring past, and the only thing I could think about was the sinking feeling in my stomach. When we got home, I didn't even wait for her to say anything. I just grabbed my things, walked inside, and went straight to the bedroom. I needed to be alone, to think, to sort out the storm of emotions that were rattling around in my head. Emma followed me in, her voice shaky. Can we talk more about this? Please? I didn't answer. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, trying to collect my thoughts. I needed space. I needed time. But most of all, I needed answers. Do you want to leave me? I finally asked, barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air, and I couldn't believe I was asking it. I didn't want to hear her answer, but I needed to know. Her face softened, and she sat down next to me, her hand reaching for mine. No, I don't want to leave you. I love you. I never wanted this to happen. I just don't know what's going on with me. I wanted to pull away from her, to tell her that her words weren't enough. But I didn't. I just sat there, feeling the weight of everything crashing down around me. The love was still there, but it felt different now. Damaged. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of Emma's steady breathing beside me. The whole situation kept replaying in my mind over and over, like some horrible loop. I couldn't make sense of it. The love I thought we shared, the trust we had built, was it all just a lie? I didn't want to make any decisions that night. Everything felt too raw, too emotional. I needed clarity, but my head was spinning. So, I did the only thing I could think of: I retreated. I pulled away from her physically and emotionally, needing distance to process. In the morning, Emma tried to talk to me again. She made coffee, tried to make small talk, but I wasn't having it. I wasn't ready to face her. I was angry, hurt, confused, and most of all, I was scared. Scared that everything I thought I knew about our relationship had been shattered in a matter of seconds. I spent most of the day avoiding her. I went out for a long walk, cleared my head, tried to get some sense of normalcy back, but it wasn't working. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation we had in the car. At one point, I even considered calling her parents. Maybe they could help, maybe they could give me some insight, but I knew that would only make things worse. This wasn't their problem. It was ours. Eventually, when I couldn't avoid it any longer, I sat down with Emma that evening. She had a look of exhaustion in her eyes, like she hadn't slept either. We both knew things had changed. But the question was, could we fix it? Could we move past this? I didn't know. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. That evening, we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, neither of us knowing quite where to begin. The air between us felt thick to ignore, too thick to pretend like everything was okay. Emma kept glancing at me, biting her lip as if she was trying to find the right words. Finally, I broke the silence. What exactly were you looking for with him? I need to understand. Emma hesitated, then sighed deeply. I don't know, really. It started out innocently enough. He was just someone to talk to at work. But somewhere along the way, I began to feel seen. You know? Like I wasn't just the wife, the worker, the daughter. He made me feel special again. She paused, her eyes welling up with tears. I didn't want it to go this far. I never planned for it to, but it did. Her words hit me like a punch in the stomach. He made you feel special? So that's what this was about? It wasn't about love or passion, it was about feeling important. A part of me wanted to scream, but another part of me, one I wasn't proud of, felt sympathy for her. But that sympathy was short-lived. So what? Now you're confused? I shot back, frustration bubbling up. You're telling me that because some guy at work made you feel special, now our whole marriage is in question? She flinched at my words, and I immediately regretted the way I said it. I didn't want to hurt her, I just didn't know how to express the pain I was feeling. But I couldn't backtrack. Not now. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, her voice cracking. I just wanted to feel like I mattered outside of everything else. The silence that followed was heavy. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, not exactly, but I could see the regret in her eyes. The vulnerability. I had to admit, I had no idea what I was supposed to do with this. Should I pity her? Should I try to understand her? Should I demand more from her? I took a deep breath. I need some time, I muttered. I don't know if I can handle this right now. Emma nodded, her lips trembling. I understand. The next few days were a blur. I gave Emma the space she needed, and honestly, I needed the space more. I couldn't even look at her without feeling a pit in my stomach, so I retreated to my office, spent long hours there, and barely came out. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, maybe some clarity, maybe just an escape, but I kept replaying everything in my head. I thought about her words, how she felt seen by this guy, how she felt special again. I couldn't help but wonder if I had been so focused on us, on the day-to-day routines, the obligations, that I had forgotten to make her feel important. Was I to blame for her feeling this way? I couldn't stay in that headspace forever, though. It wasn't healthy. So, after a few days of silence, I decided it was time to take action. I needed to get my thoughts in order, to figure out if we could fix this, or if it was already beyond repair. I walked into the living room, where Emma was sitting, nervously scrolling through her phone. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. "I think we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but distant. She put her phone down and nodded. "I know." We sat together on the couch, a few feet apart, the space between us like an unspoken reminder of everything that had happened. "Look, I'm not saying that we can just forget this," I began, my hands clasped together. "But I think I need to understand something first. Why him? What did he give you that I couldn't?" Emma seemed taken aback by the question, and for a moment, I thought I saw her bristle. "I never meant for it to get this far. It wasn't about him exactly. It was more about what I was missing in myself. And I was too afraid to talk to you about it. I thought I could handle it on my own." The rawness in her voice cut through the tension. She wasn't making excuses, she wasn't denying her part in it. And for the first time since everything went down, I saw her not as the wife who betrayed me, but as a person who was struggling, just like I was. We sat there for what felt like forever, neither of us speaking, just feeling the weight of everything hanging in the air. My heart was still pounding, but something in me shifted. Maybe it was the way Emma spoke, or maybe it was the vulnerability I could see in her eyes, but I realized I wasn't the only one hurting. I looked at her, and for the first time, I really looked at her. The woman I'd married, the woman I thought I knew inside and out. She was hurting, too. And though I was furious, though I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me, I understood something that moment: she wasn't just the villain in this story. "I should have noticed," I said quietly, almost to myself. "I should have noticed that you were struggling." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she reached for my hand, her voice trembling. "I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to tell you that I felt invisible. That I needed something more than the routine, the expectations. I thought I could just keep it to myself." Her words stung, but in a way that was different from before. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was sad. I could feel the weight of the years we'd spent together, the years I had taken for granted, the years where I didn't take the time to really see her. And that was the hardest part. This wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't a simple misstep. This was a failure of communication, of both of us. Emma had withdrawn, and I hadn't noticed. Maybe I hadn't asked enough questions, maybe I had just assumed that everything was fine because, on the surface, it looked like it was. But deep down, I knew I had been too complacent, too caught up in my own life. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice low. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. I was so focused on my own stuff, I didn't see what you needed." Emma squeezed my hand, nodding as tears rolled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, too. I never wanted to hurt you." We sat there for a while longer, neither of us knowing exactly where to go from here. But for the first time, I felt like we were starting to have an honest conversation. We weren't talking in circles anymore. We weren't hiding behind half-truths. After that conversation, everything felt different. Not better, not healed, but different. Emma and I spent the next few days talking more than we had in a long time about everything. Not just the affair, but about our lives, our relationship, what had been working and what hadn't. We were peeling back the layers of our marriage, and some of the things we uncovered weren't easy to face. I won't lie, there were times when I wanted to shut down, when I wanted to walk away and pretend like it hadn't happened. It would have been easier that way. But there was something inside me that kept pushing me to keep going. To keep talking. To keep trying. We weren't making huge leaps forward, but the fact that we were communicating in a way we hadn't before gave me a sliver of hope. I could see the effort in Emma's eyes, in the way she was trying to make things right. She wasn't asking me to forgive her immediately, and she wasn't demanding that we fix everything overnight. She was just there, trying. And honestly, that was all I needed to see. But even so, there was still a question lingering in the air: could I forgive her? Could I move past this? I spent hours thinking about that question. I weighed the pros and cons, tried to imagine life without her, but every time I did, the thought of walking away felt empty. There was too much love there, too much history. I wasn't ready to give up on us yet. So, after a lot of soul-searching, I finally made the decision. We need to try, I said one night, my voice quiet but certain. We need to try to fix this. Together. But I can't do it if we're not both in it. You can't be halfway in, and I can't just sweep this under the rug. It's going to take work. It's going to take time. Emma's face softened, and she nodded, tears welling up again. I'm all in, she whispered, squeezing my hand. I'll do whatever it takes. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't a magic fix. But it was a start. And that was enough. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of emotions. It wasn't easy, not by any stretch of the imagination. There were moments when we made progress, and moments when I thought we might fall apart again. But we were doing the work. We were being honest with each other, and that made all the difference. We started going to therapy together, something I had been hesitant about at first, but Emma insisted. I wasn't sure what to expect, but the sessions helped. Talking to a neutral third party gave us a safe space to air our frustrations without fear of judgment or anger. It allowed us to dig deeper into the issues that had been festering underneath the surface for so long. We also made a conscious effort to reconnect outside of the therapy sessions. We started having date nights again, simple things, like dinner at our favorite restaurant or a quiet walk in the park. It wasn't about pretending everything was fine, but about reminding ourselves of why we got together in the first place. We needed to rebuild the foundation, brick by brick. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Some days, the memories of what had happened would surface, and the hurt would creep back in, like a shadow that wouldn't leave. There were times when Emma would look at me with guilt in her eyes, and I'd feel that familiar stab of betrayal, but we didn't run from it. We acknowledged it, talked about it, and worked through it. There were also days when I would catch her looking at her phone, and my heart would race, wondering if she was texting him, wondering if those feelings would come flooding back. I hated that feeling, the insecurity that had taken root in me. But I didn't let it control me. We talked about it openly, and slowly, those feelings started to lose their power. We were healing, but it was a slow process. It wasn't linear, and I knew that. There were setbacks, there were tears, but there were also moments of laughter and understanding that hadn't been there in a long time. A few months passed, and things between Emma and I started to feel more normal. Not perfect, not the way it had been before everything went down, but something more honest. Something real. We weren't pretending anymore. We weren't wearing masks of perfection. We were two people who had been broken, who had hurt each other, but were willing to try to rebuild what we had. It was exhausting at times. The emotional work was draining, but the payoff was worth it. I started seeing changes in Emma. I saw the spark in her eyes return, the one that had been dimming over the years when she felt invisible. She was talking to me more, opening up in ways I hadn't seen before. We were learning to communicate, and that was something I hadn't realized we had been lacking. It wasn't just about talking, it was about listening. Truly listening. And I wasn't perfect either. I had my own insecurities, my own fears, and there were moments when I questioned whether I could truly forgive her. But I realized that forgiveness wasn't just a one-time thing, it was something I had to work on every day. It was a choice I had to make, and some days were easier than others. We still had hard days. There were moments when the past would come rushing back, and the weight of what had happened would feel like too much to bear. But we were learning to deal with those moments together, not letting them tear us apart. And the truth was, as much as I hated the pain this experience had caused, I couldn't deny that it had brought us closer. It had forced us to confront our issues, our vulnerabilities, and our weaknesses. It had forced us to see each other not just as partners, but as people who were both struggling and growing. As time went on, I started to see things differently. It wasn't just the relationship that needed work, it was me, too. I realized that I had been so focused on my own needs and routines that I hadn't been paying attention to Emma's. I had assumed she was fine, but that was a huge mistake. I had taken her for granted, expecting her to always be the strong one, the one who held everything together. And in doing so, I had overlooked the fact that she was struggling, silently, in ways I couldn't see. We both began to make changes. For Emma, it was about finding her own voice again, rediscovering who she was outside of being a wife or mother or employee. For me, it was about learning to be more present, more mindful of her emotional needs, and more aware of the little things that could make a difference in her day. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned whether we were doing enough, whether we were enough. But slowly, I started to see the benefits of all this hard work. We were learning to trust each other again, not just trust that the other person wouldn't betray us, but trust that we could be vulnerable and still be loved. We were finally creating a new version of our relationship, one that wasn't built on perfection or complacency, but on realness and effort. There were no more illusions of, we've got it all together. Instead, we were learning that love wasn't just a feeling, it was an action, a choice. I couldn't tell you that everything was perfect. There were still moments when I felt a pang of insecurity, when I saw the ghost of what had happened in the way she smiled at me or the way she looked at her phone. But those moments didn't control me anymore. I had control over my reactions, over my own healing. And so did she. Looking back now, I can honestly say that everything we went through, though painful, traumatic, and life-altering, has shaped our relationship into something stronger. I don't know if I can ever forget what happened, and I don't think that's necessary. But I can see now that it was a wake-up call. A brutal, gut-wrenching one, but a wake-up call nonetheless. It forced both of us to look in the mirror and face what we had been avoiding for so long. The experience taught me a lot about forgiveness. Not just the kind of forgiveness where you say the words and pretend everything is okay, but the real kind, the kind that takes time, the kind that requires vulnerability, the kind that involves both healing and action. It's not an easy road, but it's a road worth traveling if you're both willing to put in the effort. I learned that love isn't always the fairy tale we expect it to be. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes downright painful. But it's also beautiful. It's the little moments of connection, the quiet words of understanding, the times you hold each other up even when you feel like you can't stand on your own. Love isn't about avoiding the hard stuff, it's about facing it together, hand in hand. If I could offer advice to anyone going through something similar, it would be this: don't run away from the pain. Don't let the shame or embarrassment keep you from doing the work. It's not easy, and there will be days when you want to quit. But if both of you are willing to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to listen, there's always hope. You can rebuild. It's possible. And no matter how much it hurts, remember that you're not alone. If you love each other enough to fight for it, you can make it through. But it takes both of you. It's not about blaming one person or pointing fingers, it's about doing the work together. We're still rebuilding. Every day, in small ways, we're learning to trust again, to love again, and to be more aware of each other's needs. And while I know we'll never be the same as we were before, I can honestly say that what we have now, what we've fought for, is stronger than anything we had before. And that, in itself, feels like a victory. And that's the end of the story. Thank you for letting me share this journey with you. If anyone reading this is going through something similar, just remember, it's okay to take your time. It's okay to feel lost. Just don't give up on each other. That's the final part. Let me know if you'd like any revisions or further details added.